Meccano, part number 1572. Switch. Morse code and switch. From the 1930s Meccano Electron set. Hi folks and welcome back. This week it's the third of the Space 2501 builds, the landing module. That one point in the project that is probably the most stressful. It's a bit that not only does the engineering need to work perfectly, but also the skill and training of the pilot. And it's normally the end of the journey where something is most likely to go wrong. The movie Battleship in 2012, I think, gets it perfectly right, when at the end of a long interstellar flight, one of the invading ships crashes. And the movie does a good job on how sci-fi is a divided genre. Do you like your sci-fi to be science fact or science saga? Star Trek is a science fact, while Star Wars is a science saga, and the two tell very different tales. Battleship falls into the latter of the two options, very much science saga, a grand tale that leaves you rooting for the underdogs, an all action, all kicking fight that you know the good guys will win because of plot science. The movie Aliens tells a very different story. A team of highly skilled and equipped soldiers with all the groovy toys get annihilated by an alien species. Even the end is hardly what you'd call a victory. And there are some good crossover moments in the genre. Josh Whedon's Firefly is a great example. The science is very limited. We know it's there, but it doesn't try to explain it or do crazy things with it. The Firefly series and the follow-on movie have one aspect that the feel-good sci-fi movie tends to lack, and that's near-perfect writing and time for character development. You want to get to know the crew. You want to see why they act the way they do. That and the music, in my mind, is one of the best soundtracks ever written. But have you ever wondered when science fiction started? After all, we refer to it as modern science fiction, with Frankenstein being the beginning point. But that was written by Mary Shelley in 1818, over 200 years ago. Also, Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels is also acclaimed as being the beginning of science fiction. And that was written nearly 100 years before Frankenstein in 1726. Nearly 2,000 years ago, a Syrian author called Lucian of Samosata, a town in modern-day southern Turkey, wrote a short novel called A True Story. Lucian and his fellow heroes sailed out into the Atlantic, having passed through the Pillars of Hercules, of which the Rock of Gibraltar forms one. The pillars bore the warning Ne plus ultra, translating as nothing further beyond. From there he sailed out into the vast emptiness that was the turbulent Atlantic, home of the mythical island Atlantis, home of the gods. He and his crew were blown off course by a storm and make landfall on an island where there's a river of wine and is filled with fish being hunted by bears. The trees on the island look like women, which in ancient Greek culture are dryads. And to be honest, when I've imbibed the somewhat vast quantities of alcohol in my younger days that I used to, I've seen some very strange things. But also, that's not all that uncommon on a weekend in concert when people are drinking. Mind you, it's a lot tamer than it used to be. Anyway, where was I? This marks the island as having been visited by Hercules and Dionysus. Shortly after leaving the island, they're caught in a huge whirlpool and transported to the moon, where they find the indigenous people fighting a war against the people of the Kingdom of the Sun over the colonisation of the morning star, or as we know it, Venus. You have to remember At this point, everything orbits Earth, not the Sun. Both sides are using hybrid animals to fight the war, and in the end the forces of the Sun win and a peace agreement is made. Upon returning to Earth, he and his shipmates are swallowed by a 200-mile long whale, in which they find fish people living and wage a war against them, and win. The short novel goes on from one adventure to another, each one better than the last. What Lucian was writing at the time was a satire. His opening to the novel is that everything written here is a lie. This is the foundation of science as we know it. The Greek culture was doing something that had never been done before, and that's recording the science and engineering that was happening at the time in written works. Before this, we used storytelling as a method of explaining the how and why. His short novel is the first known written work to include outer space, alien life forms, and interplanetary warfare, and is regarded as the first science fiction written. It's around 2,000 years old. One of the points he was trying to get across was, be careful what you believe when you read something. In other words, fact check your information. Because at the time, people did believe that the ancient Greek tales were true. What he was warning about were some of the earliest forms of conspiracy theories, and the need to not explain things that can be proven by science by using a story, or as he puts it, a lie, to explain it away. After all, we know how thunder and lightning are formed. But 2,500 years ago, the idea of Zeus throwing lightning bolts from the heavens was a believed cause. And one of those theories is that of a flat Earth. It's only been the last 500 years that we have believed in a spherical world. Before that, the Earth was flat. And this is the point that Lucian is trying to prove, that through science we can better improve our education. So, why do we believe in conspiracy theories? What makes it so easy? In the past, it was a lack of education that led to the problem. You learned what you were taught by your parents, and any information to the opposite was wrong. But in today's world, the problem doesn't so much come from a lack of education, but from poor quality education, and the ease of the internet and social media to disseminate information. And when you find others who believe in the same thing, who have experienced what you have experienced, so therefore it must be true, they, whoever they are lying to us. And we've seen the light, we've found the truth. And yes, I've fallen foul of this myself from time to time. The rabbit hole I disappeared down post-divorce was one such case. And even now, there are moments when I can look at information and see the other side that leads to the conspiracy theory. The risk, as Lucian so aptly pointed out nearly 2,000 years ago, was this. By straying from the true path, the path that can be proven by logic and science leads to an impact on people's behaviours and has a long-term ripple on our very civilization, leading to greater problems. And here's one such theory. Did we land on the moon in 1969? There are abundant theories which question that, picking on bits of information that they've found, or an expert that said something cannot be correct. But the science, the engineering, and the evidence all proved to the contrary. In fact, from 1958 onwards, we have been bombarding the moon with junk from Earth. The first to achieve a landing were the Russians in January 1959 with Luna 2. But it was their sixth attempt to land on the moon, with 4 booster malfunctions and 1 partial success, when Luna 1 managed to escape Earth's gravity but missed the moon. It would take America another 6 years before they managed their first hard landing with Ranger 7 in February of 1964. Both of these landings were called hard landings. Crashing into is another term. By January of 1966, with the Luna 9 mission, Russia managed their first soft landing, a controlled descent and touchdown. And in May of that year, America also managed their first soft landing with the first of the Surveyor missions. Russia was building up to the act of sending humans into space with the Zond missions of 1967 to 1970. And with Zond 5, they completed the first launch, moon orbit, and return to Earth and safe re-entry, carrying non-human biological payload, in the form of a number of Russian tortoises. Not all missions went to plan though, and a number of non-human biological payloads died as the technology failed. As so often it does, when we push to the very edge of the envelope, the distance between doing and not doing is all too often very narrow. But I do feel sorry for the non-human biological payloads. In the end, it boils down to money. America decided that they would put the capital into a landing, and with that spent billions to achieve the goal. But Russia had shifted her aim onto Mars. It was reported in 2006 that NASA had lost the original tapes of the Apollo 11 moonwalk, but in 2008 they turned up and was sold at auction in 2019 for the 50th anniversary of the landing. Of the surviving 6 American flags that have been left on the moon, scientists believe that they've been bleached white by solar radiation. 5 of them are still standing. But the 6th was blown flat when Apollo 11 lifted off to return to Earth.